I think I speak for America, first of all, when I say you're killing the turtleneck, number one, and number two,
yeah.
we like the Snoop wine over your shoulder. You and I have talked about Snoop wine in the past. But let's talk about this bill.
Yeah.
We were discussing the minimum wage. You just heard Minority Leader Mitch McConnell say there shouldn't be a $15 minimum wage hike. If you want to do that, do it separately. Do you expect that at the end of the day, when all is said and done, there is a minimum wage hike in the COVID relief bill?
No, Willie. Unfortunately, no. I think that's one of the things that's going to be pushed by the wayside because symbolically, at least, the Democrats know they've got two things they got to push for. They got to somehow get a stimulus check that goes to people that at least adds up to $2,000 at some point. They do not want to be slammed next summer when it comes to the 2022 election time by not having gotten those $2,000 checks or some variation of that to people. They can always fight for a $15 minimum wage. They can fight for that at the state level. They can fight for that at the federal level. So I think that's going to go by the wayside. But here's, I think, the larger problem here, and we've seen this. We've seen this with gun reform. We've seen this with immigration reform, where there's such a clear disconnect between Republican leadership in the House and Senate and what regular people want. I don't know any regular person out there who is out of a job right now, who has a spouse out of a job right now, who's trying to make ends meet. We're forgetting about the large number of Americans who've had kids have to move back in with them, relatives have to move back in with them because they've lost jobs that'll never come back to this pandemic. No regular person is angry about getting a check. No regular person right now in America is saying, yeah, I think the next 6 months are going to be significantly better the way that Mitch McConnell is saying. So this is just a disconnect between regular people. Mitch simply wants to be an obstructionist, but it's not good policy. And hopefully the Democrats will get something that hasn't been completely hacked up and marked up by the time they can push it through in the Senate.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's proposal to assemble a 9/11-style commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol is facing immediate Republican opposition, with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell calling it, quote, partisan by design. Pelosi suggests the commission would be comprised of 7 potential Democrats and 4 Republicans with subpoena power, only for the Democrats. Under Pelosi's proposal, President Joe Biden would appoint 3 people, while each of the 4 congressional leaders would appoint 2, but presidential appointees could be from either party. Republican leaders said they would support an investigation modeled after the 9/11 Commission, which was equally divided between Republican and Democratic appointees, with both having subpoena power. The scope of the commission is also a sticking point, as the Speaker wants it to look at all components of the riot, not just security failures. McConnell says if the commission examines violent extremism, it should include extremism from the left. Legislation to form the commission was delayed last week because of the partisan divide, though Democrats could pass it along party lines. Joe, what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, you need to investigate what happened that day. So to be going down rabbit trails on Antifa or trying to find something that wasn't there seems to be off point and not germane. On the Republican side of things, I agree it needs to be down the middle. You need to have the same number of Republicans as you do Democrats. And they need to get to the truth. You know that Brandeis quote that sunlight is the best disinfectant? He's right, of course. And we need transparency here. We desperately need it if we're going to ever be able to move forward. And if we're ever going to be able to tell the truth to the American people about the insurrection against our country on January 6th. The National Commission on the 9/11 terrorist attacks were run by a former Republican governor and a retired Democratic chairman of a Foreign Affairs Committee. Their commission worked in a dignified, respectful manner. And I'll tell you what, a lot of their recommendations were actually adopted. And now the United States has gone 2 decades without a similar follow-up attack on our homeland. 20 years ago, it was Islamic terrorists who attacked our country, and they sought the destruction of America. The 9/11 Commission, they showed patience. They showed professionalism. And yes, they were still able to show dignity. They also put country above party and the truth above talking points. So what do we do now? What do we do 2 decades later after a terror attack that was launched on our own Capitol. When tens of millions of people who have swallowed whole damaging conspiracy theories about presidential elections still don't believe the truth about presidential elections, are still lied to about pandemics, are still lied to about political insurrections. So what should the goal be that drives this new commission? And yes, I'll say again, it should be a bipartisan commission. It's simple, really. You start with the truth. That should be the only goal of President Biden, Speaker Pelosi, Leader McConnell, and everyone else involved in putting this commission together. You start with the truth. And Jason Johnson, in an age filled with lies, especially the big lie that's been swirling around us now since the middle of the campaign about election fraud, it's critical that we have a 9/11 style commission that can dig down and get to the truth about what happened on that day and why our law enforcement agencies were not ready for the attacks that everybody seemed to know were coming.
I agree, Joe, but I don't think that you can make this a bipartisan committee. And one of the reasons that you can't, look, we all wish that was the case, right? We all wish that you could have, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and they get together and work it out. But you literally have a significant chunk, not just 4 or 5 loud people, but you have over 140 in the House and several dozen in the Senate. You have a significant chunk of the Republican Party that is pretending that not just the insurrection either didn't happen, but that maybe their colleagues and ideology that they pushed for and the candidate they supported didn't have anything to do with it. And you can't put together an investigative committee on an issue where literally your coworkers may have also been conspirators. So, look, if there was an independent prosecutor they could bring in, if they want to bring in the UN, obviously we would never do that in America. But if we cannot get an independent prosecutor, then this might be the best option that we have. And if we allow the Democrats to, or if the Democrats allow the Republicans to bully them or shame them or gaslight them into making this a 50-50 bipartisan committee, you're going to get nothing but a bunch of knuckleheads like Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan who are going to sit on the committee and try and veer things into studying Antifa or Black Lives Matter or something else like that and turn the whole thing into a farce. Meanwhile, people like Officer Sinek and Eugene Goodman and men and women who put their lives on the line to protect everybody are going to be insulted and dismissed and pushed to the side. So this might be our best option. And also, this is also really key. The investigation that could be done by this committee could help in some of the prosecutions of the men and women involved in the insurrection that are happening around the country. So this is too important to be pushed down by another fake conversation about bipartisanship because the Republicans don't really want an investigation to happen.
And we want to mention Jason's new podcast entitled A Word with Jason Johnson, but my gut is it's not just one word. Premieres tomorrow on February 26th. Jason, what are we going to hear?
You're going to hear a lot of me. You're going to hear uncomfortable conversations. You're going to hear people say things in a way that they haven't been able to say them before. I'm extremely excited about this podcast. For everything that I have the opportunity to talk about in my writing and in shows like Morning Joe, this is going to be a chance to do some deep dives with some really, really great thinkers. We're going to talk politics. We're going to talk race. We're going to talk comedy. We're going to talk Funko Pops. Everything out there that is affecting and driving American conversation, we're going to talk about it with an exciting and I think really occasionally controversial racial lens.